Alright, in the next 3 videos we're going to be looking at each of the 7 supply side policies and evaluating their strengths and weaknesses. So you need to be able to come up with a particular strength and weakness in terms of each policy, in terms of its ability to achieve each goal. So the 7 policies we're going to look at: the first video we're going to look at education and infrastructure, the second video tax, subsidies, and research and development, and the third video will cover taxation reform, welfare reform and immigration. Okay, with these strengths and weaknesses, I've placed them in order based on what I believe you should talk about first, or I think would potentially be easier to talk about, or you could articulate yourself better. But this is just my opinion. Any of these strengths and weaknesses are relevant for each goal. So, starting with education, and we're going to start looking at the strengths first. So the first strength of education is that the good thing about education policies is that they're less likely to encounter political or electoral opposition, because overall it's going to improve the quality of human capital, and therefore it can often be easy to get these it can often be easy to get these policies through Parliament or through the Senate and the lower house, because they don't really have negative impacts on people. So education and training has all positive effects, unlike some aggregate supply policies like microeconomic reforms, like tariff reductions, for example, or removing subsidies. Some people, and even infrastructure, some people can be negatively affected by those policies, which often means they're harder to get through Parliament. Whereas education, there's no, besides the financial outlay, there's no negatives on people's non-material or material living standards, and overall just boosts the quality of human capital. So often these education policies are easier to get through the parties, have a shorter implementation lag, and they can get support from both parties. They have significant, such reforms can create issues, so some of these reforms can create issues for people that lose their job. Education doesn't have that weakness. Education policies are also useful because they can target particular industries or sectors that face skill shortages. So unlike monetary policy that we know is a blunt instrument, education specifically, as a form of budgetary policy, can target particular sectors of the economy that are experiencing skill shortages. So they can focus on skill development in areas where we need a lot of workers in that area. That compared to other more general aggregate supply policies like lower business taxes or lower income taxes or lower company taxes, they can be a lot more specific to certain needs of the economy. This promotes dynamic efficiency because you can boost up and multi-skill people in particular areas. This is a really good strength of education policies, is that they can target particular sectors or groups of society, and therefore help to alleviate skill shortages in particular sectors. And the third benefit is that they have significant positive externalities or social benefits. So a well-educated and well-trained population yields benefits for the whole community, not only just the person that gets the education. So another key strength of education policies is to have social benefits that flow on to others through the discovery of new things, through lower crime rates, through having a more educated society that's probably going to pay more tax as well. And therefore there will be more education and it was left solely to the market. Another strength is that, like most agri-supply policies, it can help to achieve sustainable growth. So because it's focused on the supply side of things, it can achieve all 3 macroeconomic goals simultaneously: strong sustainable economic growth, low inflation and full employment, because it boosts out our productive capacity and then allows for stronger growth or more production without inflationary pressures. So that's different to the demand management policies like monetary policy that may have a conflicting relationship. In terms of weaknesses, spending on education and training can experience implementation lags, even though it's probably less likely to than some of the other policies. There needs to be cooperation between both the state and the federal government for most education and training programs, particularly at high school level. So the lengthy negotiations between the state and federal government can lead to long implementation lags for these education and training programs. There's also a long impact lag, as program needs to be established and it takes time for people to develop the skills and have the desired impact on society. So the key weakness is the fact that there's an implementation lag because of cooperation between states and federal parliament, and then that flows on to a lengthy impact lag because it can take a while for the people to develop the skills. Spending on training and education needs to be funded by taxes, so it can lead to a bigger budget deficit and can put pressure on the federal budget. It can also mean that we have to pay higher taxes to fund this spending, which can go away from other areas that need it in the economy. It can also lead to crowding out of the private sector, because when the government runs a budget deficit, they need to fund that. That means they have to borrow from potentially local banks. Local banks have less liquidity and they raise their rates. So this can lead to negative impacts for society as well. So one weakness, again, is the fact that it can hurt the budget and lead to crowding out. As with any government policy involving expenditure, that if they spend more money on education, that means that there's an opportunity cost in the sense that it could go to other areas of society. So they have less money potentially for health or for infrastructure or for welfare. All government expenditure being carefully planned and assessed because they have the costs and benefits. Okay, we'll talk about infrastructure in the next video.